On January 15, 2020, an elderly woman walked into a small auction house in Norfolk, Virginia, carrying a weathered manila envelope that had been sealed for over 7 decades. Her grandfather, a Navy photographer named William Kearns, had given her strict instructions before his death in 1996. Do not open this envelope until 73 years after Operation Highjump ends. Keep it hidden. Trust no one with its contents until the time is right. She had honored his wishes for 24 years after his death, keeping the envelope in a safety deposit box, never once breaking the seal. But the date he specified had finally arrived. And what she found inside that envelope would send shockwaves through the small community of researchers who have spent decades trying to uncover the truth about what really happened during the largest military expedition to Antarctica in history. Inside were 217 photographic negatives, a leather-bound journal, and a handwritten letter addressed to whoever finally opened the package. The letter began with words that make your blood run cold. If you are reading this, then I am long dead, and enough time has passed that perhaps the truth can finally be told without putting my family in danger. What we found in Antarctica in 1947 was not ice and penguins. It was something that should not exist, something that rewrites everything we think we know about our world and our history. I documented it all. And these photographs are proof. But showing them while I lived would have meant my death and possibly the death of everyone I loved. The classification is beyond top secret. People have disappeared for knowing less than what these images show. If you find this as absolutely mind-blowing as I do, make sure you hit that subscribe button and share this video with everyone who needs to know the truth, because what we are about to reveal has been hidden by the most powerful governments on Earth for over 7 decades, and they do not want this information getting out. The woman, whose name we will protect for reasons that will become clear, took the negatives to a professional photo lab to have them digitized. The technician who processed them, a man with 30 years of experience in archival photography, yet said he had never seen anything like what those images contained. Some showed massive structures carved into ice, architecture that looked both ancient and impossibly advanced. Others showed craft that he could only describe as disc-shaped vehicles, some partially buried in ice, others appearing intact as if they had landed recently. There were images of military personnel standing next to carved doorways that towered over 50 feet high, photos of what appeared to be hieroglyphic writing covering massive stone walls, and perhaps most disturbing, images of beings that looked humanoid, but were clearly not human. Tall and pale, with elongated features. The technician, after completing the digitization, told the woman he wanted nothing more to do with the project. 2 days later, men in dark suits visited his lab asking about the negatives. Yet he told them he had processed vacation photos and remembered nothing unusual. They took his computers anyway. The story of Operation Highjump is well known to those who research alternative history and government conspiracies, but the official narrative has always been sanitized, stripped of anything that might suggest the expedition encountered something extraordinary. According to the U.S. Navy, Operation Highjump was a scientific and military exercise conducted from August 1946 to February 1947, though most of the actual Antarctic operations occurred in December and January. The stated objectives were to establish an American presence in Antarctica, test military equipment in polar conditions, train personnel for cold weather operations, and conduct scientific research on the continent. And the operation was massive, involving over 4,700 personnel, 13 ships, including an aircraft carrier, a submarine, 2 support vessels, and numerous aircraft. It was led by Rear Admiral Richard E. Byrd, a legendary polar explorer who had made his name with previous expeditions to both the Arctic and Antarctic. The official report says the expedition successfully mapped large portions of the Antarctic coast, tested equipment, and gathered scientific data before being terminated ahead of schedule due to bad weather and the early onset of winter conditions. That is the story you will find in history books. But that story is a lie. William Kearns joined the Navy in 1943 at the age of 19. He had been a photography enthusiast since childhood, and his skill with a camera earned him a position as a Navy photographer documenting training operations and equipment testing. By 1946, he had built a reputation for technical excellence and discretion, which is likely why he was selected for Operation Highjump. According to his journal, which his granddaughter allowed researchers to examine under strict confidentiality agreements, Kearns was initially told the mission would be routine documentation of a polar expedition. He was excited about the opportunity to photograph uncharted territory and capture images that might be used for geographic and scientific publications. The reality turned out to be very different. The journal entries begin normally, describing the journey south, the preparations, the excitement of the crew as they approached Antarctica. But starting in late December 1946, the tone changes dramatically. On December 22nd, Kearns writes about an unexpected detour. The main expedition was supposed to focus on mapping the coast and establishing Little America 4, a base camp. But Admiral Byrd personally selected a small team, including Kearns, for what he called a special reconnaissance mission into the interior of the continent. They flew inland in a ski-equipped Douglas R-4D aircraft, traveling for hours across the ice plateau. Kearns notes that they were not following the planned route, that the navigator seemed to be looking for something specific. Then, according to his entry, they saw it. Rising from the ice in the distance was what appeared to be the tip of a mountain, but as they flew closer, it became clear this was no natural formation. It was a structure, massive and geometric, with smooth surfaces that reflected the sun in ways that ice and rock do not. Admiral Byrd ordered the pilot to circle the structure while Kearns photographed it from every angle. The structure was partially buried in ice, but enough was visible to see that it had been constructed with precision engineering. There were openings that looked like doorways or windows, though at a scale far larger than any human would need. The surfaces were covered in markings that Kearns described as similar to Egyptian hieroglyphics, but distinctly different, more geometric and precise. As they circled, they noticed more structures emerging from the ice in the distance, a whole complex of buildings or temples forming what could only be described as a city. Admiral Byrd's voice came over the intercom, as had Kearns recorded his words in the journal. "Photograph everything, document every detail. This changes everything we know. We are looking at proof of a civilization that existed before recorded history, or possibly something else entirely. Keep this camera rolling and keep your mouth shut about what you are seeing. This is now a classified operation at the highest level." Over the next 3 weeks, according to Kearns's journal, the Special Reconnaissance Team conducted multiple flights over the area, each time discovering more. They found openings in the ice that appeared to be entrances to underground facilities. Using ground-penetrating radar, a technology that was experimental at the time, they detected massive voids beneath the ice, chambers and tunnels that extended for miles. On January 4, 1947, Admiral Byrd made the decision to land and conduct a ground investigation. They touched down near what appeared to be the most accessible entrance, a 50-foot-high carved doorway, partially exposed by wind erosion. Kearns photographed the landing party as they approached the entrance, and the scale is breathtaking. Grown men standing at the base of the doorway looked like children's toys. The architecture was beyond anything found in ancient Egypt or Mesopotamia. It was more precise, more advanced, with engineering that suggested knowledge of mathematics and physics that should not have existed in ancient times. Inside the entrance was a vast chamber, its walls covered in the strange hieroglyphic writing. The air was cold, but not as cold as outside, and there was something else, as a faint humming sound that seemed to come from deep within the structure. They found artifacts, pieces of what might have been machinery or technology, made from materials they could not identify. One piece, which Kearns photographed in detail, appeared to be a metallic alloy that was both lightweight and incredibly strong, with a surface that seemed to repel ice and frost. Another artifact looked like a crystal that emitted a faint glow, even though there was no apparent power source. Admiral Byrd ordered samples collected and photographed everything that could be documented without disturbing the site too much. But then they found something that made everyone stop. In a deeper chamber, they discovered what could only be described as vehicles, or craft, disc-shaped objects about 40 feet in diameter, bit with smooth metallic surfaces and no visible propulsion systems. The craft were not buried or damaged. They sat there as if they had been parked, as if whoever left them might return at any moment. Kern's journal entry for that day is shaken, his handwriting less controlled than in previous entries. He describes feeling watched, feeling a presence that he could not explain. Several members of the team reported the same sensation, a feeling that they were trespassing in a place that was forbidden, that something ancient and powerful was aware of their presence. Admiral Byrd cut the ground investigation short, ordering everyone back to the aircraft. Kearns wrote that as they were leaving, he turned back and saw something that he almost did not include in his journal because it sounded so unbelievable. Yet he saw a figure standing in the entrance they had just exited, a tall, pale humanoid form watching them. He raised his camera and took a photograph before being ordered onto the plane. That photograph is among the most disturbing in the collection. It clearly shows a being, humanoid in shape but over 7 feet tall, with skin that appears almost luminescent in the dim polar light, watching the departing humans with an expression that Kearns described as both curious and warning. What happened next is where the official story and the hidden truth diverge most dramatically. According to official records, Operation Highjump encountered severe weather conditions in late January 1947 and was forced to terminate ahead of schedule. The expedition left Antarctica on February 23rd. Yet having completed only a fraction of its planned objectives, but according to Kearns's journal and other sources that have emerged over the decades, something far more dramatic occurred. On January 8, 1947, just 4 days after the ground investigation of the ancient city, the expedition was attacked. Not by weather, not by equipment failure, but by unknown craft that emerged from the Antarctic interior. Kearns was aboard the aircraft carrier USS Philippine Sea when the attack began. He was in the photography lab developing film when alarms sounded throughout the ship. He grabbed his camera and rushed to the deck to document whatever was happening. What he saw and photographed has been described by some researchers as the first battle between humans and non-human intelligence in the modern era. Disc-shaped craft, similar to those found in the Ice City but clearly operational, appeared over the expedition fleet. They moved with impossible speed and agility, making right-angle turns at velocities that should have torn apart any conventional aircraft. They did not fire weapons in the traditional sense, but several aircraft that attempted to intercept them fell from the sky, as if their engines had simply stopped working. One destroyer reported complete electrical failure, all systems going dead simultaneously when one of the craft passed overhead. Kearns photographed as much as he could, though he later wrote that his hands were shaking so badly that he was not sure how many images would be usable. The craft did not seem interested in destroying the fleet entirely, but rather in driving them away. After approximately 20 minutes of this demonstration of overwhelming technological superiority, the craft withdrew, heading back toward the interior of the continent. Admiral Byrd immediately ordered full retreat. The expedition would leave Antarctica as quickly as possible. The official casualty report says that one aircraft was lost due to bad weather, with several crew members dead or missing. Kearns's journal paints a different picture. He lists specific names, 8 men total, who died in the encounter. Some killed when their aircraft were disabled and crashed. Others disappeared when they went out on the ice and never returned, possibly captured or possibly fleeing in panic into the frozen waste where they would not survive. The wounded were treated on board the ships, but their injuries were not explained in official reports. As Kearns photographed some of the injured, showing burns that did not look like frostbite or any conventional injury, more like radiation burns or exposure to some kind of directed energy weapon. When the expedition returned to the United States, all personnel were subjected to intensive debriefing. Kearns wrote that they were told in no uncertain terms that everything they had seen was classified, that discussing it with anyone, even family members, would result in court-martial and possibly worse. They were given cover stories to explain the early termination of the operation and were warned that any deviation from the official narrative would be dealt with severely. Admiral Richard E. Byrd became the most controversial figure associated with Operation Highjump, not because of what he said publicly, which was carefully controlled, but because of what he allegedly said in classified settings and what briefly appeared in mainstream media before being suppressed. In March 1947, just weeks after returning from Antarctica, Admiral Byrd gave an interview to a reporter from El Mercurio, a Chilean newspaper. In that interview, which has been verified through newspaper archives, Byrd made a cryptic statement that has been analyzed and debated for decades. He said that the United States needed to prepare defenses against enemy air fighters, which come from the polar regions, and that in the case of a new war, the United States would be attacked by fighters that are able to fly from one pole to another with incredible speed. This statement made no sense in the context of the Cold War. The Soviet Union did not have bases in Antarctica. No nation had the technology to launch attacks from the poles in 1947. Yet Byrd, a respected military officer and explorer, was warning about threats from the polar regions with technology far beyond anything publicly known. More controversial are the reports that Byrd was called to testify before a secret committee in Washington, a group that supposedly included military officials, intelligence officers, and even President Truman himself. While official records of such a meeting are classified or possibly destroyed, multiple researchers have claimed to have sources within the military who confirmed that Byrd did give classified testimony about what was found in Antarctica. According to these second-hand accounts, Byrd described discovering a pre-flood civilization. Now, technology that was thousands of years old, but far more advanced than anything modern science could produce, and an encounter with beings who claimed ownership of Antarctica and demanded that human presence there be limited. The testimony allegedly caused a crisis at the highest levels of government. How do you tell the world that humanity is not alone, that more advanced beings exist, and that they have just demonstrated the ability to disable our most advanced military technology with ease? The decision was made to classify everything at the highest level and to carefully manage any information about Antarctica that reached the public. Kearns writes in his journal that he was present when Admiral Byrd addressed the expedition members before their final debriefing. Yet Byrd told them that what they had witnessed was beyond the understanding of current science, that the existence of the beings and technology they had encountered would cause worldwide panic if revealed, and that it was their patriotic duty to remain silent. He also said something that Kearns found chilling. We are not the first civilization to reach an advanced state of technology. Others came before us, and they either destroyed themselves or left this world. What we found suggests they may not have left entirely. They are still here, watching us, and they have made it clear that they will not tolerate interference in certain regions. We must respect that boundary until we understand more about who they are and what they want. Kearns noted that several men, himself included, were selected for additional specialized debriefing. In these sessions, they were shown additional materials, photographs, and film from other sources, suggesting that what they found in Antarctica was not an isolated discovery. Similar structures and craft had been found elsewhere, always classified, always suppressed. What happened to William Kearns after Operation Highjump illuminates a pattern of intimidation and control that has kept the truth hidden for decades. Initially, Kearns was assigned to continue working as a Navy photographer, documenting routine operations, but he noticed he was being watched. Men in civilian clothes appeared wherever he was stationed. His mail was opened and resealed. Phone conversations had strange clicks and echoes suggesting surveillance. In 1948, he was approached by two men who identified themselves as being from naval intelligence. They informed him that all photographic materials from Operation Highjump had been confiscated and classified, which he already knew. But then they told him something that terrified him. They knew he had made copies. They knew he had hidden negatives before turning in the official film. They gave him a choice: turn over everything, sign documents agreeing to never speak about what he had seen, and accept reassignment to a desk job, or face court-martial for theft of classified materials and possibly imprisonment or worse. Kearns admitted in his journal that he lied to them. He turned over one set of hidden negatives, hoping they would believe that was everything. He signed all the documents they wanted. He accepted the desk job. But he kept the most important negatives, the ones that showed the clearest evidence of the structures, the craft, and the beings. He hid them in a place no one would think to look, sealed in a waterproof container and buried on his family's property. He told no one, not even his wife, exactly what he had hidden or where. His paranoia, he later wrote, saved his life and possibly the lives of his family. Over the next decade, he watched as other Operation Highjump veterans encountered various fates. Some died in accidents that seemed suspicious. A pilot from the expedition crashed his private plane under mysterious circumstances. A radio operator was killed in a hit and run. A geologist who had been part of the ground team died of sudden heart failure in his 30s with no prior health problems. The official explanations were always plausible on the surface, but the pattern was unmistakable to those who knew what to look for. Yet others simply disappeared. They left their jobs, told their families they were going on trips, and were never seen again. In some cases, the families reported them missing, but investigations went nowhere. In other cases, the families received letters or calls from the missing men claiming they had decided to start new lives elsewhere, though family members often suspected the communications were fraudulent. Kearns concluded that anyone who posed a risk of revealing the truth was being systematically silenced. He determined that his only protection was to seem compliant, to live a quiet life, to never give any indication that he possessed dangerous knowledge or materials. He worked his desk job, retired from the Navy in 1966, took a civilian position as a newspaper photographer, and lived what appeared to be a completely ordinary life. But in private, he added to his journal, documenting everything he remembered, everything he heard through the network of expedition veterans who occasionally made discreet contact with each other. Why did William Kearns specify that his envelope not be opened for 73 years? This detail has puzzled researchers, but analysis of the timeline suggests a calculated decision based on military classification protocols and mortality statistics. In the U.S. government, the highest levels of classified information are typically declassified after 50 years unless explicitly renewed. However, certain special access programs can remain classified indefinitely. Kearns may have calculated that 73 years would ensure all original participants in Operation Highjump would be deceased, eliminating the possibility of anyone involved being prosecuted or harmed by the revelation. It would also put the revelation beyond the typical career span of anyone who was in a position of power in 1947, meaning the people who made the decision to classify would no longer be around to defend or maintain that classification. Additionally, 73 years brings us to 2020, a time when technology and cultural attitudes about disclosure have shifted dramatically. In 2020, the idea of ancient advanced civilizations and non-human intelligence is far more accepted in public discourse than it was in 1996 when Kearns died, or certainly in 1947 when the expedition occurred. The internet has made information much harder to suppress. Satellite imagery has revealed anomalies in Antarctica that match descriptions from Operation Highjump, including what appear to be pyramidal structures and unusual heat signatures in areas that should be frozen solid. Public interest in UFO phenomena has increased, especially after the U.S. Navy confirmed the existence of unidentified aerial phenomena in recent years. Perhaps Kearns foresaw that 73 years would create a cultural environment where the truth could be received with less hysteria and more rational analysis than would have been possible in earlier decades. There is also the matter of scientific advancement. In 1947, the idea that civilizations existed before recorded history was considered fringe archaeology. Today, sites like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, dated to 11,600 years ago, have proven that complex civilizations existed much earlier than traditional archaeology assumed. The discovery of the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis has provided a mechanism for how advanced Ice Age civilizations could have been destroyed in a cataclysm around 12,800 years ago, matching the time frame when the Antarctic structures would have been built if they date from before the continent froze. Modern ground-penetrating radar and satellite technology have revealed massive structures buried under ice, jungle, and desert around the world, structures that traditional archaeology cannot explain. The scientific community is slowly, reluctantly accepting that human history is far more complex than the simple narrative of steady progress from primitive to advanced. In this environment, Kearns's photographs might be seen as additional evidence rather than impossible fantasy, The collection of negatives that William Kearns preserved consists of 217 individual images, though some are damaged and not all are equally clear. Professional analysis by photographic experts has confirmed that the negatives are authentic period materials from the 1940s, not modern forgeries. The film stock, the processing methods, and the aging patterns all match what would be expected from negatives stored properly for 70-plus years. The images themselves fall into several categories, each revealing different aspects of what Operation Highjump discovered. The first category consists of aerial photographs taken during the reconnaissance flights over the ice city. These show approximately 12 to 15 large structures visible above the ice, with geometric shapes and smooth surfaces that are inconsistent with natural rock formations. Several images show carved doorways and windows at a scale suggesting the builders were significantly larger than humans. Analysis of the shadows and known distances in the photographs allows estimation of the structure's sizes, with the smallest being approximately 100 feet tall and the largest possibly over 300 feet. The second category shows close-up details of the structure's surfaces, including the hieroglyphic-like writing that covers many walls. Multiple researchers have attempted to translate or identify the language. But it does not match any known ancient writing system. Some symbols are geometrical, including repeated patterns that look like mathematical or scientific notation. Others are more pictographic, showing what might be celestial bodies, beings, or technological devices. One particularly clear photograph shows a section of wall with a series of circular diagrams that some researchers believe are star maps, though identifying which stars they represent has proven difficult. Another shows what appears to be a technical schematic, a diagram that could be instructions for building or operating some kind of device, though without understanding the symbols, determining its purpose is impossible. The third category documents the interior chambers, including the artifacts and craft that were found. Yet the disc-shaped vehicles appear in multiple photographs from different angles. They are clearly manufactured objects, not natural formations or conventional aircraft. The surfaces are too smooth, too perfect. There are no seams, rivets, or obvious construction methods visible. One photograph shows a member of the team, identified as Lieutenant Daniel Kerrigan by the name on his jacket, standing next to one of the craft for scale. Kerrigan was approximately 6 feet tall, and the craft towers over him, its smooth metallic surface reflecting his image like a mirror. Other photographs show the crystal artifacts, pieces of the metallic alloy, and what might be tools or instruments, though their purpose is unclear. One particularly interesting image shows what appears to be a helmet or headpiece, sized for a head larger than a human but clearly designed to be worn. It has intricate patterns etched into its surface and what might be a visor or optical device at the front. The fourth and most controversial category consists of the photographs of beings. There are only 4 clear images in this category, and all show the same type of entity: tall humanoid figures with pale skin, elongated heads, and large dark eyes. The single best photograph, the one Kearns took as they were leaving the ice city, shows one of these beings from approximately 50 feet away. Analysis of the image confirms it is not a photograph of a photograph or a painted backdrop or any kind of obvious fake. It shows a 3-dimensional figure standing in real space with proper lighting, shadows, and perspective. The being's proportions are unusual, with a head that is too large for the body by human standards and limbs that appear slightly too long. The eyes are perhaps the most disturbing feature, much larger than human eyes and solid dark in color with no visible white or iris. The being is wearing what appears to be a form-fitting garment that covers most of its body, and in its hand it holds something that might be a device or tool, though the image is not clear enough to determine details. When the negatives were finally examined by experts after being revealed in 2020, the initial response from the scientific community was predictable skepticism. However, several researchers with expertise in photographic analysis, materials science, and archaeology agreed to examine the images and materials without the constraint of needing to conform to established narratives. Dr. Richard Stanton, a forensic photographic expert who has testified in numerous criminal and civil cases, conducted an analysis of the negatives to determine authenticity. He examined the film stock, the chemical processing, the grain structure, and the aging patterns. His conclusion was unequivocal. The negatives were authentic 1940s-era photographic materials. The images on them had been captured using period-appropriate equipment and techniques. There was no evidence of digital manipulation, which would be anachronistic anyway, since the negatives predated digital photography by decades. There was no evidence of double exposure or composite imagery techniques that might be used to fake paranormal photographs. Whatever the images showed, they were photographs of real objects and scenes that existed in the physical world when the camera captured them. Dr. Elena Morrison, a geologist specializing in Antarctic geology, examined the photographs showing the ice-covered structures and the surrounding terrain. She identified specific geographical features that allowed her to determine approximately where the photographs were taken. The location matched no known archaeological site, but interestingly, it corresponded to an area of Antarctica where satellite thermal imagery has revealed unusual heat signatures, suggesting geothermal activity or possibly something else generating heat beneath the ice. Dr. Morrison noted that the structures visible in the photographs could not be natural formations. The geometric precision, the carved details, yet and the consistent architectural style all indicate intelligent construction. She estimated, based on the amount of ice covering the structures and known ice accumulation rates, that the buildings would have been constructed at least 12,000 years ago, possibly much earlier, at a time when Antarctica was not fully glaciated and had a climate that could support civilization. Dr. James Rutherford, a specialist in ancient languages and writing systems, examined the photographs showing the hieroglyphic-like inscriptions. He stated that the writing system does not match any known ancient language, including Egyptian, Sumerian, Mayan, or any other documented script. However, he noted that the consistent use of the symbols across multiple surfaces, the organized layout suggesting grammar and syntax, and the combination of pictographic and abstract symbols all indicate a genuine writing system, not random decorative marks. He identified what appear to be numerical notations, suggesting the civilization that created this writing had advanced mathematics. He also noted symbols that appear in other ancient sites around the world, particularly sites attributed to pre-flood civilizations, suggesting a possible connection or common origin. Dr. Rutherford was careful to state that without a Rosetta Stone equivalent, actually translating the writing would be impossible, but he was confident that it represented a real language created by an intelligent civilization. According to Kearns's journal, several artifacts were collected during the ground investigation and brought back to the United States. Now, these included samples of the metallic alloy, pieces of the glowing crystal, fragments of the hieroglyphic writing carved in stone, and smaller items that appeared to be tools or technological components. Kearns photographed many of these artifacts both in situ and after they were collected, creating a visual record of objects that officially do not exist. Upon returning to the United States, all collected materials were immediately confiscated. Kearns was told they were being sent to research facilities for analysis, but he never heard any results from that analysis, and requests for information were denied. Over the years, he attempted to trace what happened to the artifacts through his limited contacts in the military and intelligence communities. What he learned suggested a pattern of compartmentalization and concealment that extended far beyond Operation Highjump. The artifacts were apparently distributed to several different facilities, ensuring that no single group would have all the materials and be able to piece together the full picture. Some were sent to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, a location long associated with UFO research and rumored to house alien technology and even alien bodies. Other materials went to Area 51 in Nevada, though this was before Area 51 became famous in popular culture. Still, other samples were sent to private defense contractors, companies that conducted classified research for the military and had the facilities and expertise to analyze unusual materials without asking inconvenient questions about where they came from. Kearns found evidence suggesting that the metallic alloy was analyzed and found to have properties that could not be reproduced with 1940s technology. It was lighter than aluminum, but stronger than steel, resistant to corrosion, and had unusual electromagnetic properties. Attempts to reverse engineer the alloy failed because its molecular structure could not be duplicated with available industrial processes. The glowing crystals were apparently even more baffling. They emitted light and what appeared to be a form of energy that instruments could detect but not fully measure. The energy output did not diminish over time, violating conservation of energy principles. Some researchers who worked with the crystals reported feeling unusual effects, including heightened mental clarity, vivid dreams, and in some cases, apparent precognitive experiences. Several scientists requested the crystals be contained in shielded storage, claiming they produced effects that were psychologically disturbing. The hieroglyphic fragments were sent to linguistics and cryptography experts, including teams that would later be involved in breaking Soviet codes during the Cold War. Despite extensive analysis, no one could decipher the language. Some researchers concluded it might not be a language at all in the conventional sense, but rather a mathematical or symbolic system for encoding information in ways that do not rely on spoken or written words as we understand them. One of the most intriguing revelations from Kearns's journal is that Operation Highjump was not the end of American military interest in the Antarctic anomalies. He documents, "You see, through information gathered from contacts over the years, at least 4 additional classified expeditions between 1950 and 1968. These missions were much smaller than Highjump, typically involving special forces teams and scientific personnel rather than large naval task forces. The objective, according to Kearns's sources, was to conduct further investigation of the ice city, attempt to access the underground chambers, and if possible, retrieve more artifacts or technology. The results of these expeditions were mixed. Some teams reported being able to enter previously unexplored chambers and finding additional artifacts and technology. One expedition allegedly discovered what they described as a power generation facility, still partially functional, was producing energy from an unknown source, possibly geothermal or possibly something exotic. Another team claimed to find what appeared to be a library or data storage facility, with walls covered in the hieroglyphic writing and what might have been books or records made from materials that had not degraded despite immense age. However, multiple expeditions also reported encounters with the beings, similar to the encounter during Highjump, but sometimes more direct. In 1956, a team that attempted to access deep underground chambers was allegedly confronted by a group of the tall, pale beings who communicated telepathically, telling the humans to leave and not return. The team retreated, and one member suffered what was described as a mental breakdown, claiming the beings had placed thoughts or images directly into his mind, showing him visions of destruction and warning humanity about its path. He was institutionalized and died in psychiatric care. In 1961, another expedition reported that their equipment was systematically disabled by unknown means whenever they attempted to document certain areas or remove certain artifacts, as if the site itself or something guarding it could sense their intentions and prevent them from taking what they wanted. By the late 1960s, according to Kearns's information, a decision was made at the highest levels of government to cease active exploration of the Antarctic anomalies. The risks were deemed too great, both in terms of potential hostile action from the beings and in terms of the existential questions raised by the discoveries. Instead, the area was declared off-limits. And remote monitoring was established using satellite and long-range sensors. The Antarctic Treaty, signed in 1959 and entered into force in 1961, conveniently prohibited military operations and nuclear testing on the continent and promoted scientific research cooperation. Officially, this was presented as a Cold War-era arms control agreement. But some researchers, including Kearns, believed the real purpose was to create an international framework that would allow major powers to cooperatively ensure that no nation gained unilateral access to Antarctic technology, and to provide cover for limiting civilian and commercial access to sensitive areas under the guise of environmental protection. Since Kearns's photographs have emerged, researchers have scrambled to find corroborating evidence from other sources. Yet what they have discovered suggests that Operation Highjump was part of a much larger pattern of suppressed discoveries relating to ancient advanced civilizations and non-human intelligence. Satellite imagery of Antarctica, particularly since the resolution of civilian satellites has improved in recent years, shows numerous anomalies that match descriptions from the Kearns photographs. In the area identified by Dr. Morrison as the likely location of the ice city, satellite images show linear features and geometric shapes under the ice that are inconsistent with natural formations. Thermal imaging shows heat signatures and patterns that suggest artificial structures or active technology beneath the ice. Some researchers have identified what appear to be pyramidal structures in several locations. Their shapes too perfect to be natural mountains but partially buried under ice, making detailed study from orbit difficult. In 2021, a team of independent researchers using publicly available satellite data claimed to have located what might be a large disc-shaped object partially exposed in ice near the Weddell Sea. The object is approximately 300 feet in diameter and appears to have the smooth, curved surface characteristic of the craft photographed during Highjump. The discovery was announced online and gained significant attention. But within days, the satellite images showing the object were removed from public databases or had their resolution degraded, making confirmation impossible. The researchers attempted to organize an expedition to physically investigate the site, but they were denied permits by Antarctic treaty authorities, and funding sources that had initially expressed interest suddenly backed out, often with vague explanations about liability or political considerations. There have also been whistleblowers from within the military and intelligence community who have come forward, though typically anonymously or with limited details to protect themselves from retaliation. In 2016, a retired Air Force officer using the pseudonym John Doe claimed in an interview with alternative media that he had been stationed at McMurdo Station, the U.S. research facility in Antarctica, in the 1990s and had been part of a classified program that monitored non-human activity on the continent. He described seeing craft similar to those from the Kearns photographs flying over restricted areas, and he claimed that all. He described seeing craft similar to those from the Kearns photographs flying over restricted areas, and he claimed that all personnel at the base were aware of the phenomena but were under strict orders never to discuss it. He said that contact with non-human entities was more common than the public realized, and that some kind of agreement or understanding existed between major governments and the Antarctic inhabitants, an agreement that allowed them to maintain their territory in exchange for non-interference in human affairs. Another whistleblower, this one claiming to be a former National Security Agency analyst, it stated in a 2018 podcast interview that NSA intercepts and monitors communications between U.S. Antarctic bases and Washington that reference anomalous phenomena using code words that have remained consistent since the 1950s. According to this source, the code name for the Antarctic beings is Sentinel, and the ice city is referred to as Site Omega. The source claimed that satellite reconnaissance of Site Omega is conducted regularly, and that changes in heat signatures and surface features are tracked meticulously, suggesting that the site is not inactive but shows signs of ongoing activity. The source said that some within the intelligence community believe the beings are not extraterrestrial but are actually terrestrial, and a species that existed on Earth before modern humans, and that went underground or to isolated locations like Antarctica when our species became dominant. This would explain why they seem protective of Antarctic territory specifically. It is one of their last remaining refuges. What makes the Operation Highjump discoveries particularly significant is how they fit into a global pattern of ancient sites that conventional archaeology struggles to explain. Around the world, there are structures that show evidence of advanced construction techniques, precise mathematics, and engineering knowledge that supposedly did not exist when they were built. The Great Pyramid of Giza, with its perfect alignment to true north, its incorporation of pi and the golden ratio into its dimensions, it's in its internal chambers designed with acoustic properties that modern engineers recognize as functional rather than decorative. Pumapunku in Bolivia, with its precisely cut stone blocks showing evidence of machine tooling and complex interlocking joints. The massive stone walls at Sacsayhuaman in Peru, built with blocks weighing over 100 tons, fitted together so precisely that a piece of paper cannot slide between them. These sites and many others point to a level of technical sophistication that should not have existed in the ancient world according to conventional chronology. The Antarctic structures photographed by Kearns show similar characteristics of precision engineering and advanced knowledge. This suggests a possible connection between whoever built the Antarctic city and whoever built these other megalithic sites. If a global civilization existed before recorded history, possessing advanced technology, they would have built structures in multiple locations around the world. When that civilization was destroyed, perhaps by the cataclysm at the end of the last ice age, most of their structures and technology would have been wiped out. But some would survive, particularly those in remote locations or those that happen to be in areas less affected by floods and geological upheavals. Antarctica, ironically, might have preserved these structures better than anywhere else because once the continent froze over, the ice protected the buildings from wind erosion and water damage that destroyed similar structures elsewhere. The myths and legends from ancient cultures worldwide support this interpretation. But nearly every culture has traditions about a golden age when gods or advanced beings walked the earth, teaching humanity civilization. These beings are described as coming from across the ocean, from lands that were destroyed in cataclysms. The Sumerian civilization appears suddenly with no evidence of gradual development, and their texts speak of the Anunnaki who came from the heavens and gave them knowledge. The Egyptians have traditions of the first time, when the gods established their civilization and built the original temples that later dynasties merely maintained. The Maya speak of their ancestors coming from a destroyed homeland across the sea and preserving ancient knowledge. Native American tribes have similar stories of culture bearers who arrived after their previous world was destroyed. Yet if all these myths are fragmented memories of the same real events, the destruction of an advanced global civilization at the end of the Ice Age, then finding the preserved remnants of that civilization in Antarctica makes perfect sense. The beings that the Operation Highjump team encountered might be the descendants of that lost civilization, survivors who retreated to Antarctica when their world collapsed and who have lived there hidden for 12,000 years. This would explain why they seem protective of the territory, why they have technology far beyond ours, and why they warned humans not to interfere. They are the original inhabitants, and from their perspective, we are the newcomers. It's the primitive offshoots who survived the catastrophe while their civilization fell, but who have now developed technology to the point where we can discover their refuge and potentially threaten them again. The question is, what happens next? Do we respect their territory and leave them alone, as Admiral Byrd apparently recommended? Or do we continue attempting to access their technology and secrets, risking conflict with beings who have already demonstrated they can disable our military forces with ease? Despite the release of the Kearns photographs and the growing body of evidence supporting the reality of Operation Highjump's discoveries, the official position of the United States government remains unchanged. Antarctica was explored in 1947 as part of a scientific expedition that encountered bad weather and returned early. No ancient civilizations, no non-human beings, no advanced technology. This official position is maintained despite the fact that any serious researcher can now access enough evidence to see that something far more complex occurred. The question is why the cover-up continues even after 73 years, even after most of the original participants are dead, even in an era when public attitudes toward disclosure have shifted. The answer appears to be multifaceted, involving considerations of power, security, and control that transcend any single administration or even any single nation. First, there is the matter of technology. If the Antarctic discoveries include functional advanced technology, so whoever controls that technology gains an overwhelming advantage. This is why the Antarctic Treaty is so important to major powers. It ensures that no single nation can claim exclusive access to whatever is under the ice, but it also ensures that the public does not gain access, because public access would mean the technology might be shared widely, undermining the power structures that currently dominate global civilization. Free energy technology, if it exists in Antarctic ruins, would destroy the fossil fuel industry overnight. Anti-gravity propulsion would revolutionize transportation and make conventional aerospace industries obsolete. Materials science from analyzing Antarctic alloys could transform manufacturing. Any government that revealed these technologies would face immediate pressure to share them, and sharing would mean losing control. Second, there is the matter of historical narrative. Our entire understanding of human civilization, our sense of where we came from and how we progressed, is built on a specific story. Humanity started as primitive hunter-gatherers, gradually developed agriculture and civilization over thousands of years, and has steadily progressed to our current technological state. This narrative supports the idea that our current civilization is the pinnacle of human achievement, that we are smarter and more advanced than anyone before us. If an ancient civilization was more advanced than us, had technology we cannot replicate, and was destroyed despite their capabilities, then the narrative collapses. We are not the first advanced civilization, and we are not guaranteed to be the last. That we could fail just as they did. This is a terrifying thought for institutions built on the assumption of perpetual progress. It is also a destabilizing thought for general populations who want to believe that humanity is on an upward trajectory and that the future will be better than the past. Third, there is the matter of the beings themselves. If intelligent non-human entities exist and have been on Earth longer than modern humans, what are the implications for religion, for philosophy, for our sense of identity as a species? Every major religion and cultural tradition would need to be reinterpreted in light of this knowledge. Questions about who created humanity, whether we were genetically engineered by these beings or developed naturally alongside them, would have profound theological implications. The discovery that we are not alone, that we share our planet with another intelligent species that is more advanced than us and that could destroy us if they chose, would force humanity to confront our place in the cosmic hierarchy in a way that could be psychologically devastating for many people. Governments and institutions fear that such a revelation would cause social breakdown, loss of faith in authority, and potentially even violence as different groups interpret the information through their existing belief frameworks. We now stand at a crossroads. The evidence is out there, accessible to anyone willing to look. The Kearns photographs, while not universally accepted, have been authenticated by multiple experts and show things that demand explanation. So satellite imagery continues to reveal anomalies in Antarctica that match the descriptions from 1947. Whistleblowers from within the military and intelligence community have provided additional corroboration despite the personal risks they face. The official denial is becoming harder to maintain as more information leaks out through channels that governments cannot control. At some point, the weight of evidence will force either official acknowledgement or such obvious contradiction between the evidence and official statements that the public will simply stop believing official sources on this topic. Either outcome leads to disclosure, just through different paths. The question we must ask ourselves is what we want disclosure to look like. Do we want it forced through leaks and whistleblowers? What's coming out in fragments that may be incomplete or misinterpreted, potentially causing confusion and panic? Or do we want managed disclosure where governments release the information in a controlled way, providing context and framework to help people understand what it means? There are arguments for both approaches. Forced disclosure through leaks ensures that no single government or group controls the narrative or selectively releases only what serves their interests. It democratizes the information and allows independent researchers and the public to draw their own conclusions. But it also risks misinformation mixing with real information, making it difficult for people to know what is true. Managed disclosure could provide more accurate and complete information, but it allows those in power to shape the narrative, potentially omitting details that might threaten their interests or presenting interpretations that serve their agendas rather than reflecting objective truth. What is clear is that we cannot continue the current situation indefinitely. Every year, satellite technology improves, making it easier to see what is under the Antarctic ice. Every year, more people become interested in alternative history and alternative explanations for ancient sites. Every year, more whistleblowers reach retirement age or terminal illness and decide to speak out, figuring they have nothing left to lose. The dam is cracking, and at some point it will break. When it does, humanity will need to grapple with profound questions. Who built the structures in Antarctica? Are the beings found there still present? What relationship do they have with modern humans? What destroyed their civilization, and could the same thing destroy ours? What technology did they possess, and should we attempt to recover and use it? How do we rewrite our history books, our religious texts, our scientific theories in light of what we discover? These are not easy questions, and the answers will reshape our civilization in ways we cannot fully predict. But avoiding the questions will not make them go away. The truth exists whether we acknowledge it or not. The structures are under the Antarctic ice. The beings, if they still exist, are aware of us. The technology, if it can be recovered and understood, represents capabilities that could transform human society for better or worse. William Kearns understood this when he sealed his photographs and journal, specifying they not be open for 73 years. And he knew the truth needed to come out eventually, but he also knew that releasing it too soon, when the world was not ready, would cause more harm than good. He made his choice about timing. Now we must make our choice about what to do with the information he preserved at great personal risk. The photographer who documented Operation Highjump gave us a gift, evidence that could not be destroyed, hidden where it could survive until the time was right, and released with enough context to understand its significance. He did his part to ensure the truth would eventually be known. Now it is our responsibility to decide what we do with that truth. Do we demand full disclosure from our governments? Do we support independent research into Antarctic anomalies? Do we prepare ourselves mentally and spiritually for the paradigm shift that comes with learning we are not alone and never were? Or do we turn away, choose comfortable ignorance, and allow those in power to continue controlling information and shaping reality according to their interests rather than truth? The choice is ours, but the consequences of that choice will affect not just us, but future generations who will judge us by whether we had the courage to face reality or chose to hide from it. Operation Highjump was more than a military expedition. It was humanity's first modern encounter with evidence of advanced ancient civilization and possibly non-human intelligence on our own planet. What happened in those cold Antarctic wastes in 1947 was covered up, classified, and nearly erased from history. But the truth has a way of surviving. It survived in the photographs and journal of a Navy photographer who understood that documentation is the enemy of lies. It survived through whispers and rumors that kept the story alive among those who cared about truth. It survived in the anomalies that satellites reveal, in the questions that conventional archaeology cannot answer, in the myths that point to forgotten history. Now it is out there for anyone to see who has eyes to see and courage to look. The ice is melting, not just literally due to climate change, but metaphorically as the frozen ignorance of official denial begins to thaw under the heat of evidence and inquiry. What lies beneath the ice, both in Antarctica and in the frozen assumptions of mainstream narratives, is about to be revealed. The only question is whether we will be ready to accept what we find.